Hey guys, can you hear me? Ha, Camilo, you shaved. Look at you. You're a brand new man. That's awesome. I wish I had the courage. Look. Uh, let's see who is here today. Awesome. Got Sven, Ronald, Ran, Raphael, Lee, Aiden, and Camilo. Awesome. I think a couple of more people should join soon. Let me just share my screen here straight away. All right, so I think you should be seeing my screen by now. How is it going, guys? I'm it's like I'm gonna exchange some ideas with you later when we have the open mic thing, but I see that some of you guys are a little concerned about the rhythm. It's like things are getting too intense. It's too fast, and I really feel the pain, because as Palomita mentioned, it got a little bit to the point that the way I approach things, is very different from a lot of people. And then all of a sudden, it's like learning a new language almost. It's like it's this weird way of doing things. But I believe that it's an important thing because if it was the opposite, right? If you knew a lot of the stuff I'm doing already, and you're completely familiar with it, all of a sudden, like, there's no reason to be here, right? So if I'm teaching you stuff in a totally different way, it's really up to you to be smart to use some of the stuff I'm teaching, mixing with the stuff you already know, and using it in a smart way. It's like I said, I'm not against you using any kind of tool. It's just I'm exposing it to a different way of doing it. I'm doing this out of my own philosophy about like creating things by hand, right? But you don't need to torture yourself if you don't want to. I kind of enjoy it. Like I said, I put my headphones on with some nice music and I just let it go and just do all this stuff by hand. But if you guys feel like it's being too painful, feel free to use other stuff and don't feel too pressure as well about like following along with me. I have a lot of experience with the way I do because I create this little method here and my little pipeline. So I'm pretty fast, as you can tell. I mean, I still spend some time after the class, of course. I'm going to spend another hour, 2 hours after the class and keep doing some more work. So it's not like things pop out of nowhere, but at the same time, I'm way faster than you guys are because I have more experience with these techniques, right? So, but don't feel pressure. I mean, like the important part of the class is to have all those videos that you can watch later and do in your own rhythm, right? It's cool that you guys are forcing yourselves, putting all your effort in there. Like you guys like waking up in the morning, going to bed so late and all this stuff just to make sure that you're part of the class. That's very cool. It's like it's an honor to me to just be here with you guys, but really don't force yourselves as like to really follow along and an obligation to show something. If it is out of pride or out of something to really force yourselves, like to push yourselves to get to a different level, it's like by using those different techniques and everything, I'm all for it. But just the fly on the wall thing, the way that it was structured was basically like I would just like do my thing, you guys would watch it, but I felt so bad about doing that I'm being much more careful about starting stuff more from scratch instead of like reusing more stuff that I could reuse. So in this case today, I'm planning to actually repaint the face completely, just for the fun of it, and then just for you guys to feel, it's like how it is and how I do it. But I mean, like I said, I'm trying my best to make things very methodical and break things down, but at the same time, it's a very advanced class, as I mentioned, like in my previous emails, right? It's like you're gonna need to know ZBrush fairly well and Maya as well, right? And then it's more targeted like to experienced artists, especially artists with some experience in portraits and things like that. But I'm all for it's like opening the doors for people who actually want to try it. But all I can say is that, man, I could not try to go slower. It's like it's part of the process, I guess. But my plan after today, after we paint some textures, and then basically like at this point I'm going to be I had exposed you guys to a lot of stuff to this point to get to the model. Let's say, you know, it's like after we finish our class today, basically like this render here is where I am at right now. So the only thing missing for you guys at this point here is like the post, how I approach some stuff here, and then the color of the skin. Other than that, like all the techniques apply to this model, I already show you guys how to do it. It's basically like a matter of like repeating it and adding some more variations and things like that, but that's about it. So at this point, before hair, we have covered like pretty much everything other than hair and of course the skin color, right? So I'm gonna be showing the paint today, and then starting tomorrow, I'm probably gonna take more like, I'm gonna take easy on you guys because I know it's being brutal. So I'm gonna be doing more of the fly on the wall thing. Once this is set, I'm gonna be doing more of like the detail and refining the forms and really taking my time to make it look nicer. And then you can follow along with that. You have more time to catch up and come like a little bit closer to this if that's your intention, or just watch how I'm doing it. And then in a few days, then we can start the grooming. And I was like, maybe like beginning of next week or maybe like this Thursday, I don't know. But I'm planning to actually give some time, some room for you guys to breathe. and then we can, you know, just keep doing what we're doing. And then eventually next week, we should have something, you know, with hair and, you know, and it probably, we're always going to be a little bit further down, right, the road, because like I said, I have more experience, and also because I'm doing it here and showing you guys. So it always takes at least like a day or two to catch up if you really try hard. So with that being said, I just want to thank you guys for being here with me. You know, you're the first group, the first ones who actually put the, you know, it's like a vote of confidence. You know, it's like, let's do this class. I think the guy's not going to suck too much. And this is my first experience like doing this live from home, you know. And so, and the beautiful messages you guys are posting too, when you post your work and all your suffering and everything, but then you always post something about, you know, it's like, Kris, like, thank you, blah, 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 you know. So it's being very cool, and that produces a ripple effect. You know, it's like some people are starting to pay attention, especially because you guys are such a talented group of people, you know, people are paying attention. And so that's helping, you know, for me to maybe make this a little bit more sustainable in the future. I don't know how it's going to go, but thank you so much, guys. So let's dig in this thing. So here's the current state. I show a little bit of the, you know, the detail yesterday. A couple of tricks to just like make the skin a little bit more, a little bit less plain, right? Like adding some more variation, things like that. This is just the skin shader in ZBrush, because with skin shader, you can actually have a kind of like a notion of how it would look like, let's say, you know, the albedo with a little bit of shader in there. But if I completely eliminate the shader itself and I go to flat color here, that's how my albedo looks like. Of course, like this is not the HD, right? So this is like before HD, which is, in the past, I had a problem basically like painting in non-HD. And then when you went to HD, you would create some artifacts and stuff. But I tried a couple of times with this guy here, and it seems like it's actually respecting it. So if I go to HD and I paint this, paint stuff like fine detail, when I come back here, that's what I see, right? Because I mean, there's not enough resolution here. But then if I paint anything here back from HD, I paint in here. When I go back to HD, it's there. The stuff I put in here is there. So it's not kind of like, it's not overriding things, you know. It's just like, of course, going to be a much more smooth version of my paint when I go back to HD if I paint in non-HD. And then when I paint in HD, when I come back here, it's just an adaptation of that, right? So if I, for example, if I go to the mustache here, that now it's completely stretched because it came from Dick Smith, right? Or Rick Baker, I'm sorry. So you're going to see the stretch here, but you're going to see that there's much more detail in HD. So let's do a preview here. Rest the mouse outside of the model and press A. So let's do a preview. And now you can see there's a lot more detail in here that's coming from the HD map, right? So the chin here looks much nicer. Some more detail in there in the mustache, you know, and you know, some more stuff here in the mouth as well. I start adding some little dots and things like that. But that's how we're gonna approach everything. We're gonna be painting is in HD mode, right? So the first thing I'm gonna be doing here, I'm gonna be like just picking enough average color, for the skin, right? When I picked this color here, what I did, I actually got one of his pictures from the interwebs. I got this picture here, and I was like sampling from his forehead, trying to find a spot that didn't have a lot of specular or anything like that. Seems like they are using like a flashlight in here that should be daylight calibrated, right? The number of the flashlights you're gonna get, I don't know, like 6,500 Kelvin or something like that. So it should have like a little bit of a simulation of a daylight color, right? So it's not like too yellow. It's not like incandescent light from a lamp, for example, right? But you see, like there's a lot of shadows in here. It's pretty much is hitting him right in the face. And then of course you have all those areas like of more redness and things like that. But what I did actually try to pick a little spot right here in his forehead where the shadows are not present or the highlights are not present. So around the middle in there. And I got this color in here that in his case, I'm gonna start as my average. So like 196, 155, and 127 RGB. So this is the color I picked. If I switch back to ZBrush, and if I want to create that color, all you have to do is just have to go to color here, right? And then you can actually type those numbers in there, 196, 155, and 127. And now you have the precise color in RGB, right? The interesting thing is that I painted this stuff here without doing this before, kind of like just by, you know, looking and trying to match. And then at the end, I have an average color here that I was surprised how close it is to the color I have here. So if I tried to paint just now, so I'm at 100% RGB, and I'm gonna paint that color I just picked. And you see like how it blends very well with that part of the neck in there. It's just slightly more, a little bit, there's a little bit more brown in it maybe. But the other one I had was a little bit more on the, had more red, I guess. But it's pretty close to what I had in the back, which is really cool. So let's wipe this entire thing. Let's just wipe this color and see what we get. So to do that, I have my modeling there. I saved a buffer of it because just to have the buffer in there. But my plan is to actually redo the entire thing from scratch. So let's get this to my, I have a reference in here that I'm using. That's this guy here, which is pretty much daylight, right? It's outside. And then basically you're gonna have a lot of blues added to here, you know? So I'm gonna try to kind of like average between this one and that other picture that I have that's more like a studio lighting, right? So I'm gonna put it here on the side. And what I'm gonna be paying attention here, first I'm gonna add my average color, but then I'm gonna try to find out like the colors where are gonna get more redness. In this case here, though, of course, the cheeks, right? Like a bigger blood flow. The nose is slightly pinkish and red, right? You're gonna have like all those micro veins in there, which in his case seems like it's much more intense than what I had for Dick Smith, which is cool. I love painting those micro veins. And you're gonna see some redness in the neck as well, right there. And as everything I have here, like is all low resolution, so I have plenty of room to actually imagine, you know, so I can imagine. Anyway, so I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna try to find out what's making this color red. Of course, you're gonna have a lot of blood flow that's gonna be kind of like a constant in there, but you're gonna see that in the middle, you're gonna have like some little tiny dots in specific areas like this, you know, it's like those tiny dots with the red. So when you blur your eyes, you have this impression, but then when you look at closely, you're gonna see that a lot of this redness is coming from, you know, micro stuff that's in the skin, is embedded in the skin, and some of them are more like towards the surface, right? Like towards like moles and things like that. He doesn't have like too many of those like brown moles. I have, you know, our family has some of those, like those tiny little brown moles. In his case here, he's gonna have more of those guys that you get with age, right? A little bit more of this brown spots on the sides in here. And freckles around the forehead, you know, it's like all the effects of the sun over the course of the years and all this stuff. So we're gonna be trying to pick some of those and then add to our model. And then there are certain areas, for example, you're gonna notice like around the eye bags here, you're gonna start introducing a little bit of more purples and magentas, a little bit of slightly greenish and oranges as well. You're gonna have a lot to do with fat tissue underneath. And, you know, it's like in veins and things like that, you're going to get some greens. And also around the mouth, you know, it's like you're going to introduce some grayish, slightly purplish in certain areas. Depending on, you know, the type of mouth, of course. If the guy was a smoker, right, like you're going to get different types of characters in there. So all this stuff we're going to be observing as we paint, and I'm going to be commenting on it. But for now, we're going to just paint like a plain color here. And like I said before, so if I want to paint the color, I already picked that color. I show you how to do it under color here, right? I put the color in there. So I'm going to go to RGB, not RGBZ, MRGB, because this one is going to paint the material as well. I just want to paint the color. So RGB, and then make sure it's 100%, because if I have it like very low like this, it's at 2%, and I try to colorize it, and I just see fill object here, right? See, it's gonna add very little of that. It's gonna be a tiny little layer. But if I go full on, it's kind of cool because you can actually blend things better like that. You can do like in increases of very low values. But if you go to color and put 100% here, now we have everything painted, right? So that doesn't look interesting at all. So to start painting, of course, at this point, I cannot see anything. I have no way to guide myself. So at this point, I just switched to skin shade, right? And now I can see something, and it's not like a very dramatic shader. For example, the one I use by default is this one, right? And this one here, sometimes it's hard to see what's being painted because you have a lot of shadow and things like that, right? So under rendering here, what I had before, if you remember, I tweaked my object shadowing here, and I brought it all the way down because by default, you're gonna have all those shadows, right? And I wanna make it as flat as possible. So I have it at 0 here, right? So let's go back to skin shade, and then let's do some paint here. So to start with, like I said before, you can start with like much more broad paint, but then we're gonna go more specific as we, you know, it's kind of like refining the form all along, right? So I'm gonna first like start with the brush. I'm gonna switch to the stroke to spray. I'm gonna keep my flow either like at 0 or very low. I can put a little bit more like that. Under coloring here, if you have the color with any value, basically what's gonna be doing is gonna be mixing those two colors in here, right? And we don't want that. I rather do everything in layers and without this variation, you know, as I create it automatically for me, because I think I have more control like that. And another thing I mentioned before, so the placement is at 0.5, I'm gonna leave it like that. If I want the spray to be more spread out, I'm gonna just crank it all the way up, right? So a combination of placement and flow actually helps you to spread out the spray, right? Make it like a little more tighter, you know, it's like more little dots as you spray or less. But as I said before, I mean, like a lot of people come from the traditional field, right? Like I know some guys who actually used to paint props for movies, who do CG nowadays, and they still use similar techniques. For example, when you paint a prop, like in the case of like a latex mask, right? You have to try to simulate the layers because you don't have like a nice like silicone effect, like the subsurface scattering is not quite there. So they're gonna start like painting things very like deep colors, like around the eyes. They're gonna go straight like for some deep like purples and other variations in there. And then everything's gonna look very weird for a while. And then layer by layer, they start like layering color and color, like very thin layers. And then all of a sudden they cover that, and it starts making things more even. But like I always say, I mean, like CG is such a different media, you know, it's like you don't need to follow a hierarchy for form. For example, you can keep going back and forth at any time. And when it comes to color, I mean, like if you're working with a natural, nice subsurface scattering shader, like Arnold, then you basically, this is the part that's going to do all the magic for you, right? The magic is going to happen right there with the, you know, with the nice renderer calculating the subsurface scattering in a convincing way. So that way you can actually go straight and try to match the colors as we see. And in this case here, so let's start with the spray. Let's try without the alpha first. Let's see what type of result we get. So at this point, I have the color painter. I don't need to worry about it anymore. I'm going to start introducing some of the redness. So I'm going to just like, basically like I start with the default color, and then slowly I just drag this towards the red a tiny bit and towards here a little bit. And then the intensity is going to be, you're going to keep at 100 just so you see it, but I'm going to switch right after that to something that's much lower than that. So at this point, you get this type of effect. You see, like I have no, there's not a lot of respect of the size of the brush because I don't have any alpha attached. If I make smaller, it's going to look like this, but still pretty compact. So instead of like using no alphas here, let's switch to something like, there's this alpha here, 23, right? And then there's 23 and there is 7. 23, the dots are a little bit more crisp and the 7 is a little bit more blend, right? So let's use the a little bit more blend one. And then for the alpha here, I have my alpha pretty sharp. So I'm gonna just reset it to default. So I don't have like, you know, it's like everything is, oh, and another thing, let's see if I have any radio fade. No, it's 0. So for my brush, let's see if I have the focal shift at 0. So I'm gonna just bring it down to minus, like that, just in case so it doesn't eat anything in the borders, right? So now I get this interesting little effect. Let's reduce my stroke here to flow to 0 again, and then the placement a little bit more spread out, maybe 65. And let's try that again here. You see, that's a very interesting like spray. It's kind of like it has an organic feel to it because now we have all those tiny mini dots being applied. So like I said, this is just to show you how it looks like, but normally when I paint anything, I do in very thin layers. I'm gonna go like between 2 for intensity, maybe like all the way to 10 or something like that. And then when I go to the lighter colors, I'm gonna crank a little bit more sometimes. But let's try to keep this one around, let's say like 4, something like that. And then if I paint that, you're gonna see like the effect. It's gonna start like painting, but it's very, very, you know, faint, right? It doesn't have a whole lot. So you're gonna start seeing a little bit of the redness being added. And I'm gonna go like in circular motion, right? You cannot see my brush, but I'm actually doing this with it. You know, every time I paint or sculpt something and I'm trying to add like some kind of like random effect, I do in circles like that. So you're not seeing my hand, but I'm doing like circular motions like that. So let's do the same here around the nose. And I'm working with symmetry, right? So you have to be careful to get close to the center because they're gonna be overlapping each other and you're gonna get like more saturation right in the middle. You don't need that. So I'm just gonna turn off the symmetry for now, just for the middle. And again, I have things fairly symmetrical here. The model already broke symmetry at this point, right? But it's very, very subtle the way that the mouth is turning to the side. But for painting the color, it should be very okay if I wanna paint the symmetry in here. And then it should also respect the usable symmetry. If you have any, you should work with that. I think it's more trustworthy to do this than to actually have the painting like detail, you know, it's like actually sculpting detail. I think the paint actually works better. So let's see other areas here that I can add some more redness. Let's start with the eyelids. Again, like blood flow, right? He has some micro veins and almost like mini varicose veins in there. So I'm gonna just start with slightly like that. I'm gonna go inside of the lids in here. I'm gonna start adding some more color. And you see, I'm not painting HD just now. It's just like, I'm just laying a base for everything before you jump to HD. I'm just getting the feel of the areas where I need, it's almost like a concept, right? A concept of how his face looks like in relation to all these colors. So even here in the mouth, although I'm gonna introduce more magentas and things like that, I still gonna add some of more redness in here. And the red I picked here, if you wanna know the color, I mean, like those are the values, 181, 105, and 78. Since I gave you like the base color, you know, it's probably gonna be different from your own character, but just, you know, it's clear. That's just like a slight variation from what I had as a base color, right? I tried to not go too far because I want those colors to blend at first. So let's add some more in here. It's very, very, you know, it's like, you're gonna notice everything I'm doing here is it's layer by layer, and it's very, very, you know, subtle. Everything is very subtle. I start adding those colors, and then things are gonna start building up as we go. So for the nostrils, which I need to make deeper as well, they're so shallow right now. Let's add some redness inside of it. Other areas of blood flow here, we're gonna have the neck. So here I can actually go to town and add more redness for sure. Let's get this entire area. You have like, it's like sunburn and all that good stuff. There is another thing that's very interesting to observe, which is like the compressions that happen. It's like sometimes when you have an area like the forehead in here, in the eyebrows, right? When you get the squint or something like that, you notice that there's a lot of it almost like around the wrinkles. You're gonna notice like the flow of blood is not there. It kind of gets strangled, and then you get the redness around it. And then you get slightly like yellow greenish inside of those areas. So we can try to simulate that as well by sometimes using cavity, sometimes doing by hand, depending of how you want to approach it. So for the ears as well, the ears, sometimes we have this impression that that's just the subsurface scattering, like the back scatter is going to make the redness to look natural. But the ears themselves, they have redness, right? Like just have your headphones on for a while, you're gonna notice how red they get. So there's a lot of blood flow going on in there. So I normally make them slightly reddish, but not much. I think maybe I did a little bit too much here already. But so let me just add some blood flow going on in there. And then I'm gonna expand the red here for the cheeks. I'm gonna go down a little bit. And then the chin itself, I'm gonna add a tiny bit, but not much. I mean, there's not a lot going on in there. So I'm gonna just do that. And then now we have like a fairly decent like base color to go with. Let's do a little bit more of maybe like in the temporalis right here. See, like it's a very faint effect, right? Like a 4 for intensity, so not a lot. And then the forehead here itself, not a lot. I'm gonna put more maybe like in the top in here. Although in the top, if someone has hair, the tendency is to have it much more pale, actually. You're not gonna get a lot of, unless it's a bald guy who actually is in the sun all the time, you're gonna get the tan head in there, right? Otherwise, it should be fairly pale because the hair is creating this constant shade in there. And the scalp should always look a little bit kind of like almost like cadaver, right? Like it's very, very pale. For someone who never shaved their hair and all of a sudden shaves, it's super pale. And then, okay, so now we have a little base in here we can go with, right? So we get so if I switch back here now to flat color, now I have a little bit of a clue about what's going on, right? I can see what the area. So I can go here and actually can start blending some stuff. So from the cheek, I'm gonna blend a little bit more towards the nose here, and then more towards here, not by much. And then lips, just add more around it a little bit. Actually, let me just paint inside of the mouth so we have something in there. Otherwise, it's gonna be like empty, and I don't quite like that. So from this color here, from this red, let's switch to something more like the inside of the mouth. Let's add a little bit more, more towards the magenta here, right? And then let's skip the same color, maybe like slightly more desaturated. So I'm gonna go more towards the gray here. And let's paint inside of the mouth. I can actually exaggerate this one some more so I can actually see it. And you can see the little dots in there. If you want to do something, you can actually do this. Look, go back in resolution, and if you have a good plan for your poly frame, right, for your poly groups, see, like this one I created at some point when I show you guys. I actually grouped a bunch of them and just use the poly groups group visible, right, to actually create this mask that's easier for me to just mask this stuff for HD at any time, right? So the orange stuff is always like my go-to HD stuff. And that basically eliminates everything that's in the white areas in there, right? But in this case here, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna recreate all the UVs by using the auto groups with the UVs. So in this case here now, because I planned this stuff and the side of the mouth is all in one group, like I showed you before, like when I'm showing my UVs. So I can do this, I can just isolate it and then maybe isolate the inside of the lips in here as well. And then invert the whole thing. And I have this, I can actually paint. So let's go back and then I can exaggerate here. So probably the lips, let's just hide it for now and just paint the inside itself. So I can either like just switch in, from alpha to low alpha and just paint it, or you can just be very lazy like I am. See like the size of the brush in here is not following it. It's kind of like it's actually following the object, right? So sometimes you have to double click this dynamic in here. So you see it's gonna pop pretty big. I like to have this one here so I can actually go and then just like manually do that, right? So if I have that, I can just like make it very tiny in the screen and just like crank it like that. And that should give me like a fairly plain color to go with. So as a starting point, that should work. And then of course, I'm gonna have to refine, add a little bit more of a blend in here in those areas. Let's just do that now. Inside of the lips in here, gonna get a little bit more on the reddish side. All this stuff here is so temporary too, you know, I have to go and really refine the forms in here to get those folds to look good. But as you can see, everything is spray, right? I'm not using anything too plain other than, of course, like setting the base colors first. But other than that, afterwards is all like, you know, like sprayed. So let's get that one as well, the corner. And if I need like some precision, sometimes I turn off the spray just to, you know, just to paint that area with a little bit more precision. But then I go back to the spray. So you see I have some artifacts in there inside. I have to clean all that crap. And, but that's all part of the least part of the fun, right? So all this crap in there I have to unstretch and then make deeper to make sure that it has a nice flow in there. But for now, that's the base. Oh, you get some other piece in there. Let's see what that one. Okay, got it. Let's do that. All right. So now we can switch to HD. And to do that, I'm going to just redo my groups in here again, now that I don't need to do that. Oh, actually, since we're here, let's do the inside of the eyes as well. Let's get those guys. I'm going to paint. Oops. And I'm going to paint the same color as inside of the mouth, right? See, the bags are deformed as well. Sometimes what I do, I actually get I reproject them to the eyeball, so it's perfect. But at the same time, if you're not seeing it, this is not going to affect anything. But just because I'm anal, sometimes I just like go and just like reproject everything, make sure that they are very, very round and perfectly aligned with the eyeballs. But for now, they're pretty mushed in there. So here's our creepy guy. And now I'm going to go back, actually go back to my polygroups. So let's see what we have here. Let's prepare my HD geometry groups again. So I'm gonna hide this one. I'm gonna need this area, back of the head. I don't need anything in that base. I need the lips, but I don't need the inside of the mouth. And nostrils, ears are gonna leave for later. So I'm not gonna paint right now. You're gonna get the curunculus. And that's about it. So if I reverse it, this is what I want to go into HD mode. So I'm just gonna go to group visible, bam, invert it, group visible again, bam. So now I have only 2 groups. So it's gonna be easier for me to select things now. Let's go back to the highest resolution, turn off symmetry, turn off perspective. And then around here, I'm just gonna click this like shift control just to get that area isolated, and then press A around here in the nose or somewhere. So let's go to HD mode now. And now we're gonna start like adding some finer stuff. I'm gonna isolate it by clicking solo in here. So solo, now I can see just that. And now we can start doing some painting. So the first thing I'm going to start introducing some more color variation around the eye bags. So I'm gonna do this again. I'm gonna click here and drag, and I'm gonna sample that color. So I start from the same color, and then I can start like slowly introducing some other variations. So I'm gonna go keep it the same spot in here, so at least it's in the same brightness, right, space. But I'm gonna go down here more towards like bluish purple, right? And then it might look a little weird when I first start painting. I'm gonna actually have to desaturate a little bit before I do anything. So I'm gonna go more towards the gray here. And then for RGB, I'm gonna just add like maybe 1 or 2 for intensity. I'm gonna start with 1 because those colors, they really pop. So we have to be careful, otherwise they take over. So I'm gonna start introducing some of that color more towards the eyes, the eyelids, a little bit like that. And definitely on top of it, so around here. You're gonna notice now, for example, if I crank it so you can see the effect, that now the dots are much, much, much smaller, right? You're gonna see them here. You can see the dots are much smaller because now we are working in HD, right? So we get a ton of more detail in there. So I'm gonna switch from this alpha that has this blurred kind of version of the 23. So alpha 7 is basically a blurred version of 23. So I'm gonna switch to 23 because I want this crispness. So you see like it's much more crisp right now. So let's do that, and let's see if we can increase a little bit. See the spray, the flow is already pretty low. Maybe add some more placement here. Just it's a little bit more spread out. Let's see. Yeah, that's better. Something like that. So I'm gonna keep painting in there around the eyes with the same color, but the intensity very low, right? So I'm gonna put like 1 here. I'm gonna keep painting around here, and I'm painting everything in symmetry, right? So it's gonna be very, very subtle. At the end of the day, you're gonna start seeing those colors popping through, but until that point, you just like it's gonna be barely visible. So I'm gonna be adding some of that color around here. Go back to the mouth, and then I'm gonna introduce some of that as well. Slightly towards purple and bluish, right? Especially in his mouth. I don't know if he was a smoker, but he definitely has the look of it. He was also sick. He had cancer. So especially at this age here. So I don't know exactly what was the state of his skin. So just like slowly doing this kind of stuff. Now we got some color variation there. I'm gonna add some more of this color around here, the nose as well, especially the sides of the nose. You can see in the reference that he has some slight little purples going through around there. And then I'm gonna start introducing now some oranges. So again, I'm gonna do the same stuff. I'm gonna pick the color like a default one, and I'm gonna basically exaggerate, go a little bit more towards the red in here, and then a little bit more saturated towards orange, right? And then let's start adding some oranges here. Let's start with the muzzle. Again, if I make it super strong, you're gonna see the color in here is basically this. It's adding some rust, right? But I'm gonna go back again, and I'm gonna use probably like, let's see, 4 or 5. Let's try 5, so you can see a little more. So I'm gonna introduce here to the muzzle first, some oranges. And if I switch to the flat color, you can see what we have so far. Oh, actually, look what happened here. Actually, it kept some of the texture from the HD that was there already, which I don't like. So let's just eliminate that because I want to make sure that we are painting stuff like from scratch here. So let's get this area here just painted very quickly. Let's switch to this and just pick our default color from let's see, from here somewhere. Fine. And then let's just paint this straight away. Let's eliminate this entire thing, and I can paint it again. For you guys, since you don't have anything painted, you're not going to have that trouble. But in my case here, because I didn't pay attention, before I added the color, I should have done that. But that's how I started before, so I didn't realize. Anyway. newbie, especially here. I don't want to get any of that stuff. Just eliminate that. I'm gonna try to go through very fast the stuff I already show you guys, but without talking too much, so I can actually go and just like reset the whole thing. So at this point here, let's see. Yeah, let's do that one. Let's eliminate this entire thing. All right, fine. And then let's start this process here again. So I'm gonna switch to my spray and then alpha 23. And then I'm gonna pick that color. It was my red before. Add a little bit more of that. And let's see, 5. I'm gonna start painting some here. Even higher than that. Let's try 8. Yeah, it's better, so I can see what's going on. Let's do some blend around here. And maybe, yeah, even more. I'm gonna have to actually reset the entire thing. So let's get that reddish. That's gonna happen, like I said before we started this process, that basically like the non-HD paint doesn't interfere too much with the HD, because there is information in the HD that's not in the non-HD, because it's a much higher resolution mesh. So what happened basically, like it was colorizing all the matching points between the HD and the non-HD, but everything in between was actually kept. So we kind of like tried to blur it somehow. ZBrush tried to interpolate, but at the end of the day, kind of like he kept a lot of stuff, especially the, you know, the darker spots, like the beard that we had in there, right? We really kept a lot of that, but now we can just like paint it back, no problem. Let's do some work, man. Let's try that. Let's get a little bit more on the red side and a little bit more saturated right here, so we can see some more. Okay, now I can see more of the redness right there. Right, let me turn on the, oh, ZBrush, don't crash on me. There you go. Oh, no, don't crash on me. Let's turn on the symmetry again. Let's try this area here, the neck. And hopefully soon we're gonna have it kind of reset where we were before. A little bit in the chin, not much. And eye bags. So let's see if it's too bad now, if I switch back here. Not too bad. So I have like a, kind of like a basic kind of color in there, but now we're gonna start refining this. So let's switch back to the skin shade, and let's keep introducing more colors here. So I mentioned that I started introducing some oranges, so let's go back to that. Let's sample the main color, go back to more saturated orange here, like that. And then let's keep working around the face towards the side here. So around this area here, working there. And then of course, gonna have to blend the ears later. So some oranges around the mouth right here, more towards the chin. We're gonna introduce some, especially here, close to this area here, in the interior part of the eye, right? So a little bit more orange right there. And then when it gets to this area here, it's gonna be much lighter as well. You're gonna start introducing some lighter colors. Sometimes it's interesting to just go like darker than you should, and then you can just bring the color back by using very, very light yellows, or even like close to white, like super, super light stuff. So when I get more towards the forehead here, I'm gonna introduce more orange around there and back. A little bit of that rusty color. ZBrush is acting a little funny. I hope it's not about to crash. It's kind of like it gives me those little pauses like, oh, here you go. But like I said, this machine is so solid that it rarely crashes. So let me try to add some more color here to the lips again. And then once we have like laid down, of course, all this basic color, we're gonna get more and more specific about the areas we're gonna be painting. Especially like I love the part of like painting micro veins and things like that. You see like there's a little echo of the old one here from Dick Smith, but it's very, very little. We're gonna add much more of that because it seems like he had much more of that stuff. So let's do that. Actually, the last color I picked was from the lips in here. So I'm actually introducing some of that more like magenta tone around the sides of the nose, right? And then back to the cheeks in here, gonna introduce more of that as well. So always like trying to sample close areas. For example, like you don't wanna make like the lips a tone that's so different from the rest that kind of like doesn't blend anymore. Seems like almost like it's looking like someone is wearing like lipstick, you know? It's always nice to actually sample colors around it and very slightly just like change the color here and switch the hue and saturation, you know, and try to go slowly with that instead of like going straight away like to a totally different color. And if you do that way, it's kind of like the similar approach I have with the sculpting itself, right? That we spoke about that in one of our lessons. That was actually I do everything very, very kind of like thin layers, right? Instead of like pushing the form like super hardcore, I had rather like build the form very slowly with the clay buildup, and it's a combination of helping to build the primary and secondary forms at the same time. So it's like again, it's like it's a different media, right? Like it's not like a traditional media. So we have this amazing opportunity to actually create and basically like destroy any rules you knew before. You know, it's like by just like I said, like sculpting the pores and then putting the wrinkles after, or sculpting the wrinkles and then putting the pores after, you know. I do both depending on the circumstance. And what matters is that at the end, it has to look naturalistic, right? And if you have to do this kind of stuff, by all means, I say like, go for it. I'm not like a evangelist for purity, you know. But of course, like I love the hard work. In that part, I'm kind of advocate a little bit of the purity thing about doing the work manually, because I like that. I feel closer to whoever works in things like traditionally, you know. Feel closer to the old masters, if you will, you know, like the way that those guys put so much work and effort, and it shows, you know, shows like in their work that there's a lot going on in there. I like that part. That's just me. So let's keep going around here. And now you see like I have much more of a kind of like his skin kind of, you know, start to look more like skin as you introduce those colors. But it's pretty far from what we want. The end result should have, you know, it's like a much more interesting variation. And like I said, eventually you're going to start adding those this brush here with the little dots. You're going to start seeing those dots, because we're going to start cranking the RGB color higher, especially when you're trying to break through from the darker colors to the light colors to introduce those little micro dots like of yellows, like I mentioned. But not just now. We're still working on the base here. So for the eye bags, I'm going to introduce, because he's actually, his expression, if I show you here, because you're not seeing the reference, as I can show, if you see here, for example, he's squinting, right? And when he's squinting, the blood flow is actually going away from there, like I said before. And you get like this areas of like, it's just the fat is really close to the surface, right? So you get like this greenish, yellowish color in there, combined with the darkness of the eye bag. So it's kind of like it's an interesting effect that's happening here. You get the darkness of the skin itself that's around his eyes. He has a little slightly darker around his eyes. But you also have this interesting effect that's basically like the fat tissue in almost like peeking through the thin skin in there, right? Because of the compression and the blood flow just vanishing from there. So I'm just gonna go back in here. I'm gonna try to imitate that a little bit. So I'm gonna go back here and I'm just gonna switch towards the yellow here and more towards the middle saturated yellow right here maybe. Maybe a little bit more greenish actually, more towards the green here, kind of like a lime kind of thing. And of course, like if you add this color pure, you're gonna see it's gonna be very, very, you know, almost like gonna have like a luminous effect, right? But we are using just very little intensity for everything. So at 5, I should get a little bit of that effect without becoming something that's completely distracting, right? So I'm gonna start adding some of that around here, the eye bag, introducing some yellows. And the cool thing about Arnold is that like any color you put especially with Arnold, the random walk too, those colors really show. So if you're putting something in here, Arnold's going to scatter that color to look exactly like what you're seeing there. It's almost like you don't need a bunch of layers to recreate like the subdermal layers and epidermal layers and, you know, all that stuff. It's almost like if you have everything in the paint, Arnold finds a way to actually scatter those things in a very nice way. But I mean, like if you want to go for a more complex shader network, of course, you can plug like layers, you can layer the entire thing. Some people do that. But like I said before, if my results are good with the simplicity, I'm gonna always go for simplicity first. And then as I go, if something gets a little bit more, okay, this is too simple now, and I need to incorporate something else, then I'm gonna incorporate it. Otherwise, I'm just gonna stay away from it. So you see, I'm adding more yellows around here, and it is yellow greenish, right? And you see the color is starting to show some variation in there, right? See the variation of yellows and oranges, right? And everything has this kind of sprayed effect because I want to make sure that reads like you know, it's kind of like something that's coming through the skin instead of like something that's plain. This adds a lot of variation, especially with subsurface scattering. So let's switch back to skin shade, and we're going to continue our paint here. So let's see other areas that have that similar color. So I can add some of that around here in the cheeks, a little bit more of that greenish around there, and especially here, same deal, like the blood flow. So around the lower lip right here, right towards the chin. It's going to introduce some of that color variation. Even the chin, I can actually cover a little bit more of that. And again, like towards this area here in the lower part of the face, the side. What's that? Let's get some, for the same reason here, because of the blood flow, right here in the middle, the higher part of the nose. So just gonna introduce some of that right there. And then definitely in the forehead, we're gonna introduce more of that. So we're gonna turn off the symmetry just to get the middle in here, a little bit of that color, and then turn on again and go more towards the side. We already introduced some of the oranges in there, and now we're introducing some yellows, this kind of light yellow. And they start peeking through. And then the lighter you go, the more you're gonna see this kind of like, it becomes more like the feel of skin, you know? It's an interesting effect. For example, if you have the cheeks right here, and I can turn off the color so you can see it, go to the flat material. So this area here, if I introduce something like the yellow that I have in there, look at what happens, you know? It's like it becomes like this, almost like all the microstructures in the skin, they start shining through those like deeper colors, right? So if I have like a bigger brush, for example, like that, and I do this, you're gonna see it. Look what happens, you know? It's almost like when you have like a, you know, like baby skin, you know, it's like you look and it has the rashes or whatever, you know, it's like you can see this effect of the skin, you know, that's the cells in there actually having those, this variation, right? And like I said before, what I just did here is important to do. Yesterday I mentioned that. I do this for the sculpting as well. It's all about like to add randomness and variation. It's about varying a couple of things, right? Including the intensity and the size. The same way I do for the skin detail in the sculpt, I do here for the paint. So I just had that intensity that was at 5, right? And I had it very small, so we create that little effect in there. Now I'm gonna do like a little bit less intense, let's say 3, and a bigger brush. And I'm gonna do the same thing around here to add some variation. And it's gonna be very, very subtle, but you're gonna see some of that picking through the darker tones. Like that, right? So it's gonna be like carefully, you can just introduce that. And then of course, like you can make it smaller again and go back and then fill up with more stuff. But then it's very cool to just like introduce this kind of variation, you know? Let's do around here, the eyes as well, but not much because the eyes are definitely more dark. Let's do around there. My geometry looks a little stretched in there. Oh man, nice geometry. No, it's just, yeah, it's impression. Yeah, it's okay. So, okay, so that's basically what I do, you know, to create the variations of the skin. And then everything after this is gonna be, so let's add some more of that here because the rest got a little bit too strong in there. And then after that, it's gonna be the specifics, right? You're gonna start adding some more specific color stuff. So let's do that. And I'm probably gonna keep painting this guy for a little while tonight. So I'm gonna do it from scratch. Let's do it around here. And when you do this way, you can always, you can straight away see like this effect of skin, you know, it's like just like, it's not like a plain color. I never do anything with plain color other than defining like the very basic stuff. So let's get back to this one. I'm gonna just blend this back. So from time to time, like I said, I just, I sample things. For example, if I want a better blend between like this yellow part here, if I went too over the board. So basically like I just sample something around it that has a similar color. And then I go with another, you know, with a certain intensity, I just like go over it again and I blend it back. So it basically like it blends it gets closer, you know, the color blends in a nicer way. So let's go right there. So from distance, it looks like this. It doesn't look like much, but then when you start adding all those layers and then you mix with the detail itself, right? At the end, you're gonna look at your model is gonna start looking like more like a, you know, it's like there's something in there, especially with the skin, right? So all this stuff now that I just did, I just laid down all the very minor detail. So I have like an indication of all the colors that I need for certain areas. And now I can just go to town exaggerating those colors, right? You can start with the lips here, for example. And this, his lip seems like he has a much more reddish. So I'm gonna start with like picking this color right here, like the inside in there that's not contaminated just yet. And I'm just gonna make it darker and more saturated around here. And I'm gonna go more towards red. Let's see, around there. So now, instead of like using this super spray that I'm using like that, right? You can see right here. I'm gonna switch to something that's a little bit more plain because I wanna make sure I'm marking those areas. So I'm gonna click this alpha here, gonna switch off, and let's see what we get now. So we get like this type of effect, which is not quite what we want because this, it doesn't have a fall off, right? A fall off is actually off. So you can see like it's really just circles right now. So I can switch back here because we are not using the alpha and just click the right button or the space bar to bring the menu up. And then focal shift, I'm gonna go back to 0 here. And now if I do that, now it has more of a blend, right? So that color is more natural now. So we're gonna do that with inside first. We're gonna start with inside of his mouth. And because I want a higher flow, I can control the flow right here, right? So the placement is gonna be closer to each other. And then the flow is gonna get a little bit more as well, a little bigger. So just cranking a little bit, 0.2, 0.5 here. And so now I have a better flow. So it's gonna, you know, like really colorize faster like that, right? So let's switch back to my intensity here to 2 or 3. Actually, let's do 4. And let's start painting inside. So we're gonna go right here and introduce more of this darker color, which it's much more plain, right? Like it doesn't have all those little dots for variation, but it's still a spray, right? It's just a much more broad spray. And then at some point, you're gonna add like some of the more specific details I see in his face. And because my symmetry is not perfect here, now I'm probably gonna have to actually explore the asymmetry here. So let's go back in here. all this stuff I have to fix, like the forms are a little mushed together in there, but eventually I'm gonna do the cleanup, which probably should happen in the next couple of days. Like I said, it's gonna be an opportunity for you guys to relax and just like do your own thing. And I'm gonna be doing my own thing by doing this kind of stuff, fixing, you know, it's like the geometry around the lips and really doing fixes to make everything tight. That's what people don't understand, you know. It's like when I post my work in progress stuff, sometimes I post something that looks like pretty much finished, but I mean, like, there's a lot of hackery in there. Just because I already have a lot of stuff in place, then people think like, oh, it's pretty close to finished, but it's definitely not. I like to make things you know, neat and clean things up, and that takes a long time sometimes. So now my lips have a little bit more color, still with the very generic side of things, right? But at least has a little bit of more coloration in there. But in the case of his lips, I have, like I said, like I'm gonna have some more of like some purples and blues in there. So I'm gonna introduce those again. I'm gonna get more towards right here, and then basically like around here should be good. And let's put like intensity at 2, and I'm gonna introduce some of that color around here, this top area of his lips. See, already went too much. So I'm gonna undo it, and I'm gonna put intensity at 1. Normally, like certain colors, they are more prone to actually, you know, it's like override the others. So I'm gonna keep this one at, let's see, at 1. And let's do that again. Let's keep very slowly. Another thing I have here, I think I have this stroke with lazy mouse. Turn off that shit. I mean, like it gets very slow sometimes because I'm using spray. I don't need that. So let's go back down here, the lower part of the lips. You see I have some pores in here. Those pores have to be eliminated. I have to actually bring his lips down because the hair is going to start around here, and those pores are too much around there. They're kind of overpowering. So I can do this right now. Actually, I can just smooth them out. Let's eliminate those pores. Yeah, something like that. And then go back to my color, and then introduce some more around here. Let's see what time. Okay, it's 10:31. I forgot you guys. I didn't have my alarm today, but not too bad. So let me open the mics in here. You guys can talk, and then please mute yourselves if you're not talking. And yeah, let's get back here. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. It's a very relaxing process to me. You know, it's like to paint stuff by hand. It's just, I have a blast. I mean, like, if I'm not talking, of course, what I'm going to be doing, I'm going to be, you know, it's like in my little world here with my headphones and playing some music. And this stuff, like, the time is just going to fly, you know. I just, like, spend hours doing this, and I don't even feel it. The whole reason why I got into CG at some point, you know, is like back in the 90s, I was fascinated with the Amiga computers, and I got myself an Amiga computer back in the day, and it was amazing because like it was just like this crazy checkered board floor with the chrome balls floating around. I was all like so fascinated with that. And I remember when I got my first computer, like a PC. My first PC was a 486 with 8 megabytes of RAM. It was amazing. And I had like a copy, like a pirate copy of 3D Studio for DOS back in the day. Because of course in Brazil you have access to nothing, right? Like, of course, if you don't have money, you do whatever. And I had that copy that was illegal. And then I learned all this stuff, you know. It's like in my mind, I always had this idea, okay, what a great media, you know. It's like because I was always into drawing and everything as a kid. But then I was like, what about the media? You can actually draw, you can sculpt, and you can paint, and you can actually do stuff like photographic stuff. This, I believe, is going to be the future of this whole thing. And that was back in the 90s. I was thinking about that. This is going to be the future of it. I believe in the future you're going to be able to do all those things in the computer. And I think that's what I love about it, you know, is that you can be multi, you know, media within the same media, which is very, very cool. It really attracts me.
Hey, Chris.
Yeah.
About the textures.
Uh-huh.
Do you usually use cavity maps or occlusion maps to put some detail in your textures?
I would say that back in the day when I was using V-Ray, and don't get me wrong if you guys love V-Ray, because V-Ray changed a lot since then, and I believe it actually uses the same Arnold subsurface, which came from someone. Who was the name of the guy who actually programmed? He programmed this all shader that was actually the best skin shader for Arnold for a while before they introduced this Uber shader. And then they actually rewrote that same, basically like his same code, I think, to V-Ray, and now V-Ray can do the same. But back in the day with V-Ray, I wouldn't get the scatter to look right. I mean, like, seems like the pores like would not scatter inside, and then I would always need to fake it somehow, putting like some cavity maps, you know. So I would make like the pores slightly more red inside, right? So they can pop and actually show it. But let's see if I have the image right here. This one. Let's see if I bring it up for you guys. So this guy here, for example, right, like from that website. Let's just do like a look in his pores in here. If we look at anything, of course, you're gonna see there's a lot going on here, right? But in terms of the pores themselves, it's not like they have some kind of specific color in there. They're just deeper. And I realized that when I do this in Arnold, for example, if I dig a pore that's deeper, for example, this one here, Arnold scatters it very well. And everything that's not as deep is going to look more like that. It's going to blend with the other stuff around it, right? So I trust that Arnold actually is going to scatter stuff in the correct way. So I never use cavity for anything. That's the short answer. I don't use cavity. And for the ambient occlusion stuff, if I want to make my model actually shine, especially when it comes like to my clay shaders, I add a little cavity map mixed with the clay shader just to get it. But then for the model itself, I rarely use it. I normally try to rely on the basically like the lighting, like of this the HDRI, and try to get something more physically accurate, you know. But if I need to, I mean, like if it's something more dramatic, I wouldn't mind using like ambient occlusion maybe just to mix a little bit. But in terms of cavity, I don't use it. At work, we still use it. We still use cavity. They still mix with stuff, and normal like texture artists, they like to have the control. So the more maps you give to them, the better. So the cavity map can be useful if they want to eliminate, for example, some specular for inside of pores or things like that, right? Which I don't do. I keep it like completely, you know, it's like I try to imagine the physical thing. And in the physical thing, I can see that it's a very kind of like jelly kind of structure that has the speck inside of it as well. It just like breaks a lot, right? Like it breaks into tiny pieces and then you don't see that much. But yeah, that's my answers are so long, man. It's incredible. Let's see.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, man. So let's get some stuff more specific here, like I mentioned before, because I'm going to be painting this and going back and forth. But the specific stuff I mentioned is, for example, like those micro veins, right? Like how I'm going to approach those micro veins. I'm going to switch my stroke. Let's just copy this because you see I'm a mess with this stuff. I normally don't save my brushes after the session. I'm going to have to redo all of them, which is good for you guys because you can see, you know, it's like how I create them every time. But I have to be a little bit better about that. It's just like, yeah, I when I'm in a row here, I don't pay too much attention to this stuff. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to copy my brush. I'm going to clone it. And I'm going to just, let's see who else is. Let me just mute the rest of you guys here just in case. And then you please unmute yourselves when you're ready. And then I'm going to switch here from spray to dots. And then under alpha, I'm going to switch to something like, I can even use my trusty 39, the very small one, and then use my curve here under the alpha. I'm adjusting my curve. to something a little pointier, right? Like that. And here in this case, since I'm going to be painting these micro veins, I'm going to turn on the stroke to lazy mouse, right? So lazy mouse at 0.02, same deal as usual. And then here I'm going to turn off my symmetry. And I'm going to approach right here. And then if I look at this reference here, oh, it's too much. He has all those tiny veins around his nose, right there. It's hard to see, but it's kind of like varicose veins, right? And it goes all the way at the top in here and some in here. And they are blending with some colors underneath, like the purples I mentioned before. There's, you see like the cartilage here is kind of peeking through the skin, so it has a little bit more of a yellow orange tone, so I'm gonna have to use that. That's pretty cool because it really shows in the renders, you know, it's like if you have this kind of variation in there, so I'm gonna add that as well. So I'm gonna move to the side and let's start using some, painting some of that. So I'm gonna crank the intensity here a little bit higher now. Let's try like 15. I'm gonna start with my lips in here as a sample, but then I'm gonna crank the little bit more towards the red and the saturation as well. So I'm gonna get more like that. Let's see what we get if we get like a very strong color. Yeah, something like that, right? That's pretty strong. So let's make it very small. Let's do it like maybe like, let's say 20, something like that, and then small. And let's get really close because with HD we can get that close, right? Look at all those spores I had. I show you guys the brush, right? I used for the spore and how to make it, how to create the little indentation. That's kind of cool. So here I can start painting something like, it's almost like a little river, right? Like, so kind of like going kind of like a, it's not like a straight line, right? Like you kind of break to the sides, for example. So I'm gonna go more towards the top like that. Almost like a, and then of course you can vary the intensity you're actually doing this, right? You can just go a little stronger in certain areas and then a little bit more faint in others. So that way I can actually start adding all this, you know, incorporating all this detail to the side right here. I'm going to start adding some of them a little bit more like towards the magenta side of things. And this is the kind of detail when you look in the renders, you know, that actually catch your attention, you know. So people are going to like, oh man, he's painted the micro veins and stuff. Yeah, yeah. But it's not a big deal. It's just like, as everything, the combination of all the efforts, right? Like at the end, it looks like a major kind of thing, but if you break through all the aspects of what you're doing, everything is at the end is quite simple. It's just a lot of it, you know, and using things in a clever way, I guess. You know, it's like that comes with really doing it a lot, I guess. But at the end of the day, it's not that complicated. It takes some patience and, you know, but it's the kind of detail that people get impressed, you know, when you show stuff. And then when you reveal like, oh yeah, I'm just doing this, you know, it's like at the end it's not like a big deal, I guess. So I like this little brush that I'm using right here. That's basically the one I'm using to carve, right? It's the same modified alpha with a little bit more point here, right there. I like it because in the middle you get like this very strong line, which is the vein itself. And then it has this little faded color around it, right? It creates almost like a glow. And I like that because it's almost like the vein is there, and then there's a little bit of the scatter, kind of like a fake scatter that's happening, and it's actually making things blend with the rest of the skin around it. And I really like that stuff. So I'm gonna just keep adding some of them. Let's pick one area here that has maybe like a little bit more of like a hero one in his case, which is around here. And it has one that goes kind of like that. And then again, I can vary the pressure I'm using here, right? So I get like some spots that have a little bit. I can even pick like one single spot, like it right in the middle, and add even more color like that. So it kind of like almost like there is this impression that there is a little bit of a broken vein, right? It's almost like it broke a little bit and that it had a little leak. So you can do that kind of stuff. Let's see around here, and that happens like with old people especially, you know, it's like they have all those veins and they kind of propagate. They go all the way to the top here. I noticed with Dick Smith as well, that he had like some, you know, little blood vessels in there, kind of like towards the top. So get that. And then you can get super thin if you want to go like micro, right? Like, because we have resolution here, you can go like and add some like tiny little branches, you know, it's like going to be very tiny like that. And that just adds more to the realism, right? And like I said before, when you see all this stuff I'm doing, everything is idealized, right? It's I'm using like a reference and everything, but I try to have some freedom, you know. It's like, it's not like I'm matching one-to-one those blood vessels. What I try to do with my work is actually understand how the structures work in the real world, and then I try to mimic it in a logic way, but without making a carbon copy, because that's where the creativity goes away, right? When you're trying to carbon copy things. So you see, like this kind of stuff, it just adds to the, see, this eye needs a lot of work in the sculpting department. That one, this one already has some more structure in there. So yeah, so this is for the specific stuff like the veins, right? Now let's add some of those spots on the side of his head. So let's save this brush here. Let's see, clone it again. So I have standard 1, 2, 3 now. So let's do, let's switch the alpha here to something that's a little bit more abrupt. I'm not gonna go with the square one, but I want something that has kind of like a sharper a border. So I can get something, let's say, maybe this guy here, right? That's alpha 15. And maybe I can even crank the intensity here, the contrast a little bit more. So good, like that. So now I have that kind of, actually, let's not do that. Let's keep it the way it was and just add some contrast to it. Right? So yeah, so something like that. So now I have alpha 15 with the alpha with contrast of 2.5 in here. And basically I can even reset this one to the normal curve. And then now let's try to add some of those spots. And they have to be very specific colors, right? So we are not gonna add a ton of color variation to them. I'm gonna start again with the same color from the skin. Here, pick like a generic one. And then I'm just gonna go down in a diagonal, like down and less saturated, I would say, less saturated and down. And let's see how intense this thing is for now. So for the stroke, I can just switch the lazy mouse off. Okay, so I have this kind of effect, right? So the border is a little bit more abrupt. The end is a little bit more abrupt. I can make it even more than that by just shifting here, the focal shift to something a little smaller. Like that. And now I can actually create some patterns like that, right? It's kind of like I get a better effect. So let's do a little bit more orange than that. Like that. Let's see if that works. Yeah, that looks kind of good. And then the intensity as usual, let's go down with it. So let's try 10 or 12. Again, because it's the side of the face, and if I want to save some time, I can add some of them with the symmetry. If I don't, then I go completely asymmetrical. In this case, I'm going to go asymmetrical here. And I'm going to start painting some of those spots. Let's see his reference here, what we have. Yeah, we got some rust in there. Looks very rusty. Go to the side here. And I'm going to start adding some of those guys. So let's get right here. Still a little strong. Let's see, 5. Let's get some of those like in. And again, it's all about the, you know, variation of size and intensity. So let's try. I'm going to keep trying here until I find a sweet spot. So let's see, like 2, right? It's a good intensity apparently. Maybe slightly less orange, very little like that. So let's try that. Yeah, that works better. So, and then I can add like some bigger forms like that, much more faint. Some bigger ones around here, there, and then some micro ones. If I want some more intensity, of course, I can just like keep basically like painting the same spot, you know, for a couple of seconds, and then I get a little bit stronger instead of like relying on the intensity. And then I can go back and then just do like some bigger ones. Even blending with those smaller ones sometimes. It's kind of cool to just add a little bit of a blend. So like in surrounding areas, just add a bigger spot and then go back and add a tiny one right by it, like that. So that's basically how I approach to do the smaller stuff, right? So of course, after you populate this entire area and start mixing the colors, everything starts to look a little better. Now, let's bring up some of those colors. For example, let's pretend if I go darker around the eyebrows here. So let's do symmetrically. Let's switch back to my standard 1, right? That was the spray that we had. Was that the one, or was it standard, simply standard? It was simply standard. This one, yeah. So this one here, let's pick our favorite alpha again. There was the 23. And let's just test it first with the high intensity here. Let's see what we have. Pick that color, make it a little darker, a little bit more red. So we have something like this, right? That's the spray we have. So let's do it very faint. Smaller size and smaller intensity, 8 or something. So I'm gonna add some color. Let's say we have like a darker color here around the eyebrows, which is the opposite of what we want. We wanna make it lighter in there because remember there's the bone structure, right? Every time you have like the bone structure peeking through, basically like that's gonna be shallower, right? And then basically the fat pad's gonna be forced against the skin sandwiched between the skin and the bone, right? So we're gonna get a little bit lighter color. So same is gonna go for the cartilage here. I'm gonna have to bring up the cartilage in here so we can actually see it peeking through. But here in this case here of the eyes, my example is that I wanna make sure that I'm reading the brow ridge, the bony structure, right? So let's say I have like this darker color now and I wanna bring it back. So I'm gonna switch to my material here. First, let's just pick a color. So I'm gonna go pick my regular color, like any average color here, and then more towards the yellow again, and pretty much almost white around here at the top, right? And then if you wanna see what we are doing, we're gonna switch to this, and then you're gonna really see it, right? If I do very exaggerated like that. See like this type of effect? This is the type of color we want. It's not plain white and it's not too yellow, right? I like this color very much. So we're gonna do this. I'm gonna go back 10 and we're gonna paint here. Let's see what we get. Yeah, that's much nicer. So let's do that. Let's switch back to my material, to my skin shader, and we're gonna lift this by using this very, very faint color that you're not gonna see much here. As soon as I switch back to the other shader, you're gonna see it. And like I said, like Arnold Random Walk 2 is very sensitive to this kind of stuff. So you're definitely gonna see the variation once you render with Random Walk. Gonna add a little bit of that right here. And let's see what we can see here. See like the whites start to peeking through around here. And then let's do some like at the top eyelid as well. And this really starts to pop when you start adding like a size variation as well, right? Like I said before, like with the cheeks, we did a couple of those, right? Really see like this, almost like the skin becomes more and more natural. So it's very important. It's an important pass to add like those light spots, you know? At least like in my experience, I really like it. Even if you have like a very simple base color structure, when you add this type of effect, it really helps, you know, at the end. So let's go back to my material, skin shader. And yeah, so let's do the same thing here around the nose. Let's get a little bit more towards the tip right here where you can see the cartilage picking through. So I'm gonna do that. Maybe more so towards the yellow, so gotta get a little bit more yellow in there. Maybe slightly towards the orange. Paint that, so add a tiny bit of that. And like I said, you're only gonna see this stuff once you start rendering, and you're gonna be like, oh, that's pretty cool. I can see like there's a cartilage over there, you know? And then, of course, like I'm going to be painting very specifically those little dots, right? If I want to, the black heads showing. And again, I can just like, since we are doing this now, I can show you like how I did those guys. This is coming from another model, right? But I can show you again, just in case you missed that part. So I have this little brush here. Let's see if I can find it. I have to start organizing my stuff better. So intro, so neck pimple, 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 pimple 3. Let's see, pimple 3. Is that the one? Let's see my alpha. That's not the one. So let's try pimple 2. Let's try that one. Nope. Let's try a pimple 1. I guess that's the one. That's the one. So under the alpha here is basically like what I'm using is the same alpha 39, right? But then with the drag rectangle, but then the alpha is what the magic is happening right here, basically like this, the curvature. Instead of like having that curvature that was just diagonal like that, I'm actually creating basically like this is the tip of it right there, right? And then it goes down and then goes up again. It creates a little kind of like cavity in there and then goes up. And I'm using a little bit of a radial fade, 90 here, so you can actually copy those settings. And then for the mid value, I'm actually using 50 instead of 0, right? So when I use that one, what happens in here is that it creates this effect right there. Boop. So you have those little pimples, you know. So yeah, so that's a nice way to create those guys. And of course, now I painted everything over, so I'm gonna have to paint manually those little guys. But when I normally do them, I just colorize at the same time. So I use the RGB, right? So if I have a color like, one thing I have to mention is that even though the name is blackheads, try not to go black with them because it gets very, very intense. Especially with the random walkthrough, everything's gonna show. So if you wanna go for something dark, I would go like on the brown side of things, like right here, maybe, kind of like that. And maybe a little bit desaturated, something like that. You see, like, it's not like too close to black. It's kind of like halfway almost. And then when you do it, let's do the intensity a little bit higher than that though. I have 18, let's maybe like 30, something like that. So if I do this, I'm gonna do asymmetrically. So now it has a little color in it. And then when you render, it doesn't look like much in here. Let's switch to this. But yeah, it could be a little, oh, I still have some color from the previous model, look. Very, very faint. And you don't want to go much higher than that, actually, because let's see at 50 if it's too much. Yeah, so that one actually is a better one. So at 50% color, I'm going to switch back here to this guy. And then you can actually see when I sculpt here, like that. Yeah, put a little pimple in there, and that one should have color already, you know. So you can do that kind of stuff. Looks pretty nasty from up close, huh? Yeah, but that's basically the way I did it. Oh, and all this texture here that I have, you can tell that there's no pore in there, right? Very little pore work itself. Sometimes I add like a very, very faint version of our pores, our default pores. So for example, if I have this one here, that's not the one I want. Which one is that? Central single pore. That's the one? Okay, fine. So I can actually, yeah, add one like this. I can go, instead of like using the high resolution to sculpt the pores in the nose, I'm gonna go to the lowest resolution of my HD, like that, right? And then I can actually add my pores in there, like that. Oh, actually one subdivision level higher than that. Because I don't wanna like the pore to be super detailed, right? And have all those little rays and everything represented in there. I want just like a little deeper spot like this. So like if I'm gonna do like a nose stuff, I'm probably gonna go to a lower resolution like that and then add the pores like that. So if I go, for example, I do that pore right here in the middle, like let's add 2 of them right there. If I switch back to the highest resolution, you should naturally have just the depth in there, but without the detail, right? And that's what we want, because if you watch the tutorials I posted on my Instagram, there is one I actually sculpt the face and it's kind of like a time lapse, sculpting the face and the nose. And I start by actually adding the same type of pore detail into the nose, but then I go and I smooth it out. So it's another way to do it. Basically, like what I'm doing here is the same process, not the same process, but it's the same result. You know, you can either do that, basically like add all your pores like you have in here and then just smooth it out, or you can just go to the lowest resolution and just add the pores in that resolution, and then you don't need to worry about having too much detail in there, right? And then other than that, to add this type of like crisscross kind of thing here, is that same trusty alpha that we use. That's the skin random, right? This one here with that little thing, just using a circular motion again. So basically like you're gonna do like that. And that's basically the detail for the nose. So I have this breakup that's not like a super detailed pores, but it's kind of like a, yeah, add some detail without going too crazy with it. It's just, since I'm here, just blend better this area here. And yeah, so like it's slowly you start mixing all those techniques, right? Like using this one mixed with the pores themselves. I can go back here with the pores, for example, single pore, and I can do the same thing around here that I want to start blending with those wrinkles, right? I can do the same thing. I can go back in resolution and then start adding some of those guys in the lower resolution like that. So naturally, when you go up, they're gonna be kind of like a faint version of themselves, right? So I'm gonna have like those little pores like that. And it helps with the blend because everything is gonna get more stringy and, you know, it's like with the wrinkles, right? And then at the end, you put all those things together, you start getting some more variation and start having a little bit more of like a natural result. And then of course, let's get some bumps in here. So I had it before. It was, which one was that? It was the Pimple 3, I think, that I used. Let's see what this one does. This one, yeah, just creates a very round pimple like that, right? So what I have for that one, I think if you go to my fall off here, I have like a focal shift of -59 in this case. The alpha is one of those, I don't remember exactly, but it should be like the 36 or 37, something like that. Should have like an interesting fall off. And then for the adjustment curvature, I have something like this to create that little bump, right? That's the top of the bump right there. So it has a little bit of a, you know, kind of fade at the end. So with that guy is the one basically like that I'm adding those little pimples around the nose, here the eye. I noticed the little artifact in there. Let me just fix that. So I'm just gonna do some of them. It's too big, maybe too intense. Let's get 50. Plant. Sorry, I switched from color to sculpting. It's just I get you know, it's like I see stuff. I'm like, oh, let's do a little work here and show it off how I'm doing it. So and then I can crank it and then start adding some of those details a little bit stronger. For example, the cheek right here, I can add one, the big one in there. So of course I have to rely on my reference, right? I cannot just add them, but if I'm gonna do some of those, I'm gonna add like with less intensity, so it's not something that's so characteristic of the guy. So actually, you know, I can actually add some of them that are kind of more generic. Can be a mosquito bite or whatever, just like to break up some of those, you know, just get some of those around there, and then eventually things start looking more natural. Overall, what you guys doing with your alphas, with your pore brush, I don't think a lot of you guys are going deep enough, you know. My case here, I use like 30, between 20 and 30, and I try to get something that looks more like this. And you see the distance between them? It's almost like they go and kind of connect to the next one, right? And they don't follow like a complete perfect line. That's what I said before, you know. Some of them have slightly different variation in position, you know. So it kind of, I try to get the zigzag that I told you before, but without being too precise with it, you know. Otherwise, it becomes too mechanical. So you're gonna see there's some variation. For example, if I can add one like right in the middle, right here. Let's see, like right here, for example, right, something like that. Oh, this is a different one actually I created. It's the one that has some. I actually squeezed the map in Photoshop, and then that brush is actually, where is it? Single pore standard. This one, yeah, this is the one I want. So let's say, for example, if I'm sculpting another area here that we actually see what's going on. Let's see if I have anything free. I have so much stuff covered. Holy shit, I just made a big version of that pour in there. Okay, let's see, I'll go back here. So if I go to this area, right? Oh shit, man, I'm drawing it without knowing. Let's go here. Those are way too deep, by the way. But this is not gonna have enough resolution. Let's try here. Yeah, maybe here. So if I go here, you're gonna see, I'm gonna try to add one in here. Oh, the resolution is not that great in there either. Let's try 30 for intensity. But in terms of the distance, you know, I'm gonna do one here, and you see like it almost touches the next one. So it has to have a distance that actually, when you sculpt it, you can see there's this structure in between them, right? So if you do too much distance between them, it's almost like you don't get that organic feel to it, you know? That organic feel that I have here, for example, in the chin. So you see like they are pretty close together, you know, especially here, like I said before, like more towards the cheeks, you're not gonna see too much of that. But when you get around here, then you're gonna get a little bit more compact, you know? So I'm adding some in here so you can see. So you see like, it's almost like it goes and tries to connect to the next one, right? Something like that. Another space in there. So it has a certain distance, you know, that makes sense. It's almost like it has to look like it's an organic kind of structure, you know, it's like you have those little triangulations in between them. But if the distance is too high, too big, it really doesn't sell it, you know, especially in the cheeks in here. If you have way too much distance between them, it doesn't sell. And then of course, like you see, I already have some bumps and bruises in there. So for example, I have those little bump here, 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 here. So that adds to the variation. But I'm gonna say like you guys can go deeper with your pores overall. You know, it's like based on what I'm seeing, and it seems like you are getting like sometimes a little too sharp. So it's like too distant, too sharp. So they look like little stars. You know, the little stars, they're not connected between each other. But if you get something like this that has a little bit like closer distance, you're gonna see those stars, they start becoming more of a structure, you know, so it becomes this fractal thing. And then all the variation you're gonna add on top of it, then it's just gonna add up like to the complexity of the thing, you know. But I would say something like this would be a good good structure, especially like for areas like chin and forehead, things like that. And then obviously for this area, we're gonna have to be a bit more spread out. So let's go back to paint because I went on a tangent here. So let's go back to paint. But I think it's important, you know, because I noticed you guys struggling with the pores. So it's nice to see how I have it. So you can try to mimic it, or like I said, it's a challenge, you know. It's like it doesn't look like anything. If I show something like this, you know, it's like it's just a pore. It's just sculpt the pore. It doesn't look like much, but when you start trying to apply it, then you get into trouble. Like in most of you guys got in trouble. And it's funny to observe because I got in trouble too when I was studying this, you know. I was like and trying to find like the average distance between the pores that would make sense and make it more realistic. And I see you guys going through the same stuff now and trying to nail like the first go, and it's not going to happen, guys. You're going to have to do a few times, you know. But I see some progress already. You know, some of you guys are getting the distance kind of, you know, more like it. And I believe with the variations and everything, you guys going to nail this very soon. But it takes time for sure. So let's see what we can do here when it comes to the other stuff. Let's see stuff I didn't explore. So I explored the little veins, how I apply it, how I approach like stains, like with a harsher alpha that I use. And the colors, kind of like the color scheme I use, right? That's always using this logic. If I have a more fat tissue, right, I'm gonna get a little bit more like on the yellow side of things. If I have more of cartilage, it's gonna be like a very faint yellow version that I'm gonna use probably for bone structure as well. So if he was like an old man with a very bony structure for his face, I'm probably gonna add some of that more towards the, you know, the zygomatic in here. I would have some more of that. My ZBrush actually, okay, it's working now. My mouse actually stopped working for a second. And then, so what I'm gonna do here with his eyes, his eyelids, Oh, and of course, like if you don't want to get confused with the entire thing, if you don't want to feel like, if you want to go more specific with stuff, you can always hide things in HD as well, right? So you can just like, let's concentrate just working on the eyes, right? So if I do that, at least I have like a smaller chunk I can actually concentrate on. So let's do that. So if I go to the eyes, I'm going to start adding some of those micro veins in there as well. So let's get to, I think was the standard 2, right? And let's get to that. It's going to be hard to sample now, but get that red and just like do by hand here. Something like that. Let's see how it looks like. That should work. Maybe a little bit more towards magenta. And I'm going to add some veins right here, actually, in the top. So I'm going to start with some a little bit more faded and broad, like kind of like a bigger ones. Like that. Let's see, maybe a little darker and desaturated. So let's go like bigger, like that. So you're going to see like you're just going to have the stains, right? But not necessarily the vein itself. I'm going to go here, paint some like that. And then right there. And then now, since we are here, let's do the other side before I have to redo the whole settings, right? So let's do that again here. Like very broad. I have to do more like younger people, you know. It's like I'm doing a lot of old people, and I kind of like I got a little bit of the pattern down, you know. It's like I know exactly where the certain things, some characteristics gonna be, and I have like an easier time doing this kind of stuff. But younger people is always more challenging because everything is about subtlety, right? It's very easy to hide behind a lot of detail. But of course, I try to nail my primary forms as well. I don't want to rely just on the detail because that would be stupid. Because that way, if I turn around my model, it would never work. It would look like shit. And I see this a lot out there. People nail like from one profile, one from the front, and then profile doesn't work. So now I'm going to start adding the more specific ones, right? So I have these little stains. Now I can go and I cover it with those little guys like that. And I can even add more of those stains actually, because it seems like the redness in there, that in his eye, he has even more purples. So I'm going to do that. Let's get this. You know, it's kind of like it's a weird kind of concept, right? Like this whole class. Because here's the dude saying that he doesn't want to go like anything too scientific in his approach or anything like that. So basically, like everything is very loose in a certain way because it's a very artistic approach. But at the same time, he's going microscopic into the detail. So that's kind of weird. But it sells it, you know. It's like at the end of the day, maybe that's what makes it sell, you know, is just that it looks realistic because there's certain things that people are not paying too much attention to, but at the same time being completely free, you know, it's like to create something that from scratch basically without, you know, the being scientific and spending all this time, you know, like really trying to nail something one-to-one. I could do that, but I would not be happy doing it, you know. I definitely could, you know, spend all my time using the ready-made material and textures and maps and stuff like that, and try and really nail something, you know. It's like make it look like the real thing. But that's not my stuff. I think I would be frustrated, and at the same time, I like bragging about making everything by hand. Of course, it's just like people start posting stuff like, "Oh yeah, cool," but I did this one by hand. That's a cool thing, you know. It's like if you're an artist, if you can do stuff by hand, it's always like you get more respect in a way, you know. So people, if not for the final result, at least they respect you for the effort that goes into it, because it's a shitload of work. But it's not work when you're having fun. That's what I believe. So I'm having fun. And as long as I'm having fun, I'm going to be running those classes as long as people are interested. And obviously, when all this stuff is pirated and free on the internet, which should be soon, I guess, it always happens, then I don't know what's going to happen. But I hope people are still going to support me, and realize that the important part is actually just the interaction and the feedbacks and, things like that. I hope they realize that. But eventually, if it's leaked, I might do something like instead of like using the second hour, that's the questions and answers with you guys. It's actually maybe just using the first hour, that's my monologue, and because I don't want to use any of your voices or anything like that. Don't want to pay you rights, guys, and then maybe do that. Like chop it once it's pirated, then chop it, and make kind of like accessible price or something, so people can have access to some modules, but without the important parts, which the interaction with me. I might do that, but I don't know yet.
Hey, Kris.
Yeah.
Yeah, about the classes, what you were talking the other day about piracy, and if you get all your stuff online, I think Scotty don't have the same problem because he has like all his tutorials and that kind of stuff on internet, but he still has a lot of people in his classes, because I think the most valuable thing is your feedback.
The feedback, yes, exactly. Yeah, and the interaction, right? Like,
yeah, interaction. That's true. So I think you will be able to have your classes for a long time.
Yeah, I was talking to Jaime actually over the weekend. He called me from Pixelogic, right? And we were talking about maybe doing some interchange. It was like kind of like me promoting. I don't need to promote them that much because it's like they are big. But it was cool because he offered, it's like doing this his streaming to actually have me on board for like maybe a couple of hours or maybe like half an hour, show some of the stuff, and then he said like you can plug away your classes as much as you want. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, man, thank you. And then he said like, I'm afraid that I'm gonna run out of people interested in doing this realistic portraits, for example. And then he said, but you can always like, if you come up with something like Kris Costa teaching the basics of ZBrush, I'm pretty sure people are gonna kind of like be interested. You're gonna have like people interested in learning the basics too. So, you have to be creative, I guess, to keep like a stream of people. But I tell you, man, like for someone who never did this, like from home streaming like that, I'm really enjoying the process. And I tell you, I'm kind of tired of the industry. If this becomes my job one day, I would not mind at all. But I don't know if it's gonna happen. But
yeah, I'm sure you won't have a problem with people joining your classes. The piracy is a problem, but I think for you, as I said, the most important thing is to have you for question and answers and for the feedback. So I doubt that you won't fill all the spots every single month.
I hope, man.
So,
sure.
If I may jump in. I completely agree that one of the most valuable things is actually getting the feedback, which actually makes it kind of funny because I haven't submitted anything this week because I'm like extremely busy, but whatever. Anyways, what I was going to say is one thing that you could do, and you can totally take credit for this, and this is not being recorded or anything, right?
No.
There's this website where I actually found some tutorials online, and it's actually a Chinese website. But the thing about it is that when you have a video, it actually has like your username.
Oh.
It like kind of scrolls through every now and then.
So
if you pirate it, it has your name on it, so you know who.
Yeah.
So you could probably like talk to Vimeo or whoever. It's like, hey, when I upload this, can you have like something? Or you could probably edit it so you know that somebody from your that's somebody from one of us.
Yeah.
If it gets
that's an interesting question. Yeah, it's an interesting, because I thought about that and I was like, man, if I did this manually, right, I'm gonna have to rerun this thing many times with the names.
Yeah,
it would be a shitload of work. But
I think the way that it would work is that you can only download from Vimeo if you have an account with them.
Yeah, that's true.
And then your name would just kind of show up.
Oh, interesting.
Like, hey, Vimeo, I have an idea for you guys.
Yeah.
It came out of my mind. Like,
no, yeah. I mean, like sometimes I get concerned because I'm seeing like on Vimeo, I can see the impressions, right? I can see all the impressions caused for all the videos I'm posting for you guys. And some of those videos have like a very interesting number of views already. And I like, I'm trusting that's just like you guys rewatching them many times. And I believe that's what's happening. But some numbers are like, oh, I hope people didn't give access to their friends and family.
Sneaky.
Yeah, but it might happen. I mean, yeah.
I think it's Paloma. Paloma is watching
Oh.
like 100 times, 100 times each
Oh,
video.
that's who it is.
Mm.
No, it's funny because it actually has broken down in countries as well. I can see from other, which countries are playing the most. But the thing is, like, it's with the VPN nowadays, you cannot trust that. I can just like set up that I'm accessing here from Hong Kong when I want to watch porn, right? And then all of a sudden I'm watching porn from Hong Kong. No, I'm not. So it, you know, it's VPN actually opens this whole door now that's hard to track anything. But yeah, I mean, like you guys said, I mean, like I'm trusting that the interest is gonna be based on the interaction, you know, more than anything, and hoping for the best. I mean, like for me, it's just a hobby at this point, and I'm really enjoying it, and really helps with the bills, of course. Like as you remember, like when I first put this class out, my main thing was like, dude, we have a leak in our roof. We need a new roof for our house. And it was like no money, you know, it's like to put a roof because with the salary we get from this industry, it's not much. And I was like, let's put this class and let's try to generate some, you know, money to put a new roof in our house. And you know, it's like, thank you guys, you know, for helping us to put the roof in our house. But yeah, I mean, like it's a nice source of income that, you know, if I can expand this in the future, it'll be great. If I can't, I'd rather just keep it small and just having fun with it. I don't like this whole idea about administrating things. It's too much work, you know. I'm an artist in heart, and I like building things and painting things. And I don't think I would have too much fun if I became like you know, someone with a company, you know. But let's see what happens. I'm getting old anyway. But any questions about the painting so far, guys? You see, like it's very like it's an organic layer by layer kind of thing, right? Like I show you a few ways to add this detail. Of course, like when I go more specific with pimples and things like that, I'm gonna probably use this type of technique I use for the side of the forehead in there, right? For the temple, for the temples. So, but just like with red color instead. So for example, if I go back here to standard 3, so I have that one back, right? A little sharper. And then instead of like having this kind of orangey rusty on the side, I'm gonna go for something more red in here. So just let's keep the color I have more saturated. And then let's go around here and get a little bit more intensity, 8. So around here, I can start adding some of those, you know, red dots like that. Some are gonna be very, very, you know, easy to spot. See what I did there, spot. So some of them are gonna be very easy to see like that. And then some are gonna be more broad and more faint. So like that, right? Something like that. So it's very important to have variations in everything you do, right? Don't use a brush with the same setting for too long. Of course, like if you're doing a pass, like the entire cheeks, right? For both sides, you're gonna keep like a very similar setting. But as soon as you finish that area, you switch to either a less intensity, right? If you're sculpting, or if you're painting, less intensity, in a different size, right? In the case of pores, you're gonna vary the size, but not by much. But when it comes to the paint, the more you vary the color, you know, see like I'm going like around those areas like nose, and going back and forth and looking for spots where I can add this color variation, like this redness, right? And then again, I go back to a higher intensity in a smaller size, very tiny, like 3. And I'm gonna go like and add a tiny little dot right there, another one right there. You know, it's like picking areas like that, especially around the cheeks and the nose. Those are gonna be the most affected, especially considering the reference I have in there. And then from time to time, you can just add the tiny vein, right? Shoot, like that. It has to be in a spot that actually makes sense, right? But it's interesting because we are not all of us are specialists in painting and in sculpting, but we are all human beings, and we are all specialists in humans. So the eye really, even someone who has no clue about what we are doing here, if you add certain things in a different spot, for example, it's almost like the brain can track automatically what's wrong. And kind of like the flag goes off, you know, it's like this flag, like, okay, this is it. The uncanny valley is back, you know, it's like you start like, oh yeah, I don't understand what's going on. I have no idea what's going on, but seems like my brain is flagging something that's not accepting that as a natural form, right? And then that's why you have to, it's like keep going back and forth with your reference and analyzing those things. It's like, where are those veins actually happening, and what's the possibility of that happen, right? Same thing I said about the pores. If you have the pores around the cheeks here and the muzzle and all those areas, the chin and forehead, when you get to this area around the eye, if you start adding pores all of a sudden in this area here, your brain automatically goes like, oh man, there's something slightly weird in there. I don't know. I'm not accepting those pores in those areas, Same when you come towards the nose, right? You're going to get more towards the tip of the nose. It's on high there. And the sides of the nose covering the nostrils and things like that, you're going to get more pores is spreading out. Oh, I just reversed the whole thing. Let's try it too. Let's get back here. But then see, like I have my pores in here starting to fade more towards that, right? And then, of course, like you're going to find people who has a lot of pores right here at the tip of the nose, especially like older people like that. But then again, it's not going to be like a super specific pore that has all those little raised connections in there. It's going to be something like I did in the lowest resolution, right? Go like 2 or 3 resolutions lower. Add the pore in there, just have the depth of it, but without the definition of it, right? It's kind of like I always try to imagine like the structure underneath of everything. So if there is a structure that's a cartilage and a bone pressing against something, it's almost like that area is more stretched. And also because of the character of the skin is different in different areas of the face, right? It's not going to be the same type of character in the skin. Like, you can look at your arm, you're not going to see those little tiny pores anymore. You're going to see on top of your hand, if you just like stretch your hand like that, right? You're going to see like you have this breakup, those tiny little triangles forming and stretchy areas, but without seeing the pores very well defined as well, right? So if you kind of start like looking at different parts of your body, you're going to see like very different characters for the skin. So it's just a matter of like trying to make sure that it makes sense, It's like I said, everything is idealized, but it has to be coherent with what we're trying to achieve. So let's see how we're doing with the time. We have 5 minutes. You guys can ask any questions you want. Because when I start yapping, I don't stop. You know me. Let's get some more of those little dots here somewhere. Smaller.
Is procedurals in your material in Arnold for like pores and
no. No, I don't have any. Oh, procedures I have probably just the noise. The noise I use quite a bit. Yeah, but other than that, I don't actually. But I mean, like you guys, like really feel free to experiment with that stuff. Like I said, all my stuff is kind of basic in a way. It's like the accumulation of all those things together that make the effect sell at the end. But like if I break everything down, every single thing I do, there is a lot of space for like a lot of room for improvement. I even feel like, man, I have to go back to that step and actually improve that stuff because it was done so fast. But yeah, I mean, like you have plenty of room to test that stuff.
Hi, Kris.
Yeah.
What do you do about the color around the mustache and the beard and all that? How do you approach this one? Would you?
Oh, you mean like around here?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's right. We didn't talk about the stubble and things like that. So, for example, like for the stubble, I have this brush here. Let's see, Intro Stubble 1, Stubble 2. I think the stubble. See, I name it like Stubble Better. Intro Stubble Better. Okay, so for this one here, I have this little dot, which is the Alpha 40, I believe. So Alpha 40. So it's very tiny. I have my stroke set to spray, and then the placement is 0.52, scale at 1, color 0, and then flow at 0.21794, something like that. It's very organic, right? There's no like precision or anything. And then I have my color. Let's see. So I have the RGB in the color in the S sub here turned on at the same time. because my idea is that when I was sculpting the stubble ones, I was trying to make them in a way that they look like they are ingrown. So basically like they go inside, so they create a little pore in there as I paint. So let's see how it looks like just with default stuff. So the color that I have here is just like it's red. So let's switch to something like, again, I'm not gonna go fully black. So I'm gonna go more like a grayish, brownish, like that. So grayish, brownish, like that, maybe. A little bit more. And let's see without the material. Let's see, for example, if I painted here with the symmetry. So I get this type of effect. I normally use like a couple of passes. I use a couple of passes. So one of them is going to be very faint. So I'm going to use like RGB, let's see, 24. And I'm going to switch back to my material. Thanks for bringing that back, man, because I had to talk about that and I forgot. So I'm going to do this. See, like I have like, maybe the depth is a little bit high. I can go a little bit lower than that, but I'm actually painting and sculpting at the same time, right? That's the idea here. So I'm gonna go.
Would you add this one even if you have, like, let's say Stan Winston has a little bit of a mustache and beard? Would you add that underneath anyway, or
I normally do actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Because like underneath, of course, like it can be overkill, right? Because it's going to be coloring everything. I do because I'm a maniac, but I'm playing God here. But as you go a little bit more towards the side, for example, his mustache is going to end right here, right? But let's say you can go over the board a little bit because at some point he's going to be shaving those, removing the rest of the hair in there.
Yeah.
And then in that case, I do a combination of things. I let it leak a little bit towards that area with this brush. But I also, when I do my my grooming in ZBrush with XGen, I actually shave those areas as well. And then when you shave it, you can actually define like a minimum length, right? So you can establish like a minimum length that looks like a little stubble right there. Of course, like this is not like a precise thing, right? A precise thing would be like generate like something that matches the hair perfectly and everything. But like I said, this is a painting an impression, and at the end of the day, it actually really works. So let me do this. Let me do this here. I can actually show an example. Let's see if I can pick it right here. Let's cancel that one. Let's see, like I have the Rick Baker stuff. And I have an old render that shows without this mustache. So let's see if I can find it here. Actually, let me open with this program so it's easier to see. That's the wife. Let's go back here. Images. So let's see, there's an old render I did when I was testing that stuff. That was this one here. You see right there? So it's a combination, right? It's a combination of, you can see the tiny little hairs in there, right there. You can see in the silhouette, right? And then it's a combination of having that stuff like painted with a very faint color like I was doing just now, combined with some stronger ones, and then the stubble on top with the minimum, basically like length to them.
I thought you were showing me the reference, and I was like, yeah, but what about the render? And then I realized,
this is the render. This is
yeah, amazing.
So yeah, like at the end of the day, Arnold really sells it. It's like it really, if you do it. Oh man, I hate when I pick this. I have to learn how to use this shit. There you go. Yeah. And this is basically when I was using the micro displacement as well to start like breaking up the form. So it has this nice little flakes in there. But yeah, this is like the Rick Baker when I was in Progress back in the day. But then let's close that one and go back here. So that's, it's like if I switch back here to material flat color. So you see I have a little bit of that now added, which is just a very faint version of it. I'm gonna keep adding some more right here. And again, I'm gonna be using some variation. Let's go back there. Oh, actually, I turn off the symmetry. Let's go back here. So first I'm gonna do a pass with very faint like that. Like I use like 24 for intensity, right? And then I'm gonna go back here. I'm gonna be doing the same stuff. But then eventually I'm gonna do a pass that's a much faster pass. And by faster, what I mean is like it's really like the physical movement of your arm. You're gonna do faster. So basically, like I have this one, I'm doing kind of slower here, so I have more control of where I'm putting things. But then now I'm gonna increase the intensity to something like from 24, I'm gonna go to, let's say, close to 40. And then I'm gonna do a faster pass like that. I'm gonna move my arm much faster. And that's gonna add like those pores like kind of like in a more like random position and a little bit stronger. So I have more variation to that. So that stuff, when you combine it with the stubble itself in XGen, you're gonna start selling the idea that that's actually ingrown stuff, you know. So that's basically how.
Are you extracting this one as some kind of mask converting and then contrasting, so you can get this one as mask for the XGen, or you're gonna paint entirely separate and they're not gonna overlay with the hair, because that's overkill, I guess.
Yeah, they don't match at all. They just like it's just really an impression that things are in growth in there. But I tell you that I experimented with the stuff you're saying, for example, with the hair itself, right? So when I did the hair for Rick Baker, I had this this thing that I actually added a ambient occlusion shader between the entire thing. So it was like the hair and the face had the same ambient occlusion thing. And then I made the fall off for the ambient occlusion like very, very tiny. And each one of the hairs in XGen, you can actually define the root of it to be very small, right? So we can actually make it smaller than the rest of the hair. So I did that. So basically like the contact, I forced to be a very tiny contact right there. And then I basically like there's a way for you to bake the result of that render into maps. So I have a bunch of maps I can open tomorrow and show you guys. That basically have like little black dots that match perfectly every single hair in the XGen. And that way you can actually create this effect that the hair is actually going inside. And I did the same thing. I did the same thing for the eyelashes. So the eyelashes, you can see if you look really closely, I think it's for Dick Smith. But at the end of the day, it became overkill because I was not seeing a lot of difference, but it was kind of like a way to cheat that, you know, effect of things getting translucent and going inside. So yeah, but I think, that's basically what I do. We can explore more tomorrow about the color stuff, but I think it was pretty much like a good collection of techniques that I use for this kind of like approach for the face, you know, and
yeah, super cool.
Yeah, so
super useful also to see the colors and the approach of the cartilage and where it's more fleshy, when it's more like the veins you add. It will be interesting tomorrow, like when you have a bit advanced a bit more, how much more you've added, and if you can break it down a little bit again, it will be great, because when it goes more complicated, I'm getting lost, it looks like, because it's so subtle, right? And I'm like, well, it's the same, right? But it's not really, and that's the difference.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Like, because in my mind is like, I'm doing exactly the same, but probably for you guys is like, okay, maybe, but what's happening here, because I'm not getting the same result. But it's really like, it's a matter of like adding up all those things I'm talking about, like the variation of like sizes and intensity and things like that, and just putting everything together, you know? But yeah, it's like, it's easy for me to imagine in my head because I'm already doing this stuff for a while. But I can definitely break down the process for you guys, what I did.
Cool.
Yep. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. And I hope you're having fun. Don't feel too overwhelmed. You know, it's like, it's a lot to follow with. I'm all over the place, as you can tell. You know, it's like I'm switching like from Molly to texture and everything. And that's how I work with my own personal pipeline. You know, it's like I go back and forth. Maybe if I wasn't teaching you guys today, I would probably like this stuff was already exported back to Maya for me to do some tests with the color if it's working or not, then bringing back here. And everything is very fluid, you know. Instead of like a pipeline in the studio that you have to wait a week sometimes to get a result, I get like straight away, and I know exactly what I need to fix next. So within each pass, I have a lot of improvements already in relation to the previous pass, because everything is very fluid. So sweet, guys. Thank you so much. And thanks again for the support and all the love, and love back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kris.
Thank you, Kris.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.